welcome to the Raising Kellen podcast. My name is Marsh Naidu, and I'm a physical therapist as well as parent raising my son Kellen, a 10-year-old boy with cerebral palsy. I blog at raisingkellen.org, where we curate resources to empower and educate parents raising children with disabilities. This digital platform is a free resource and part of a 501c3 nonprofit registered in the state of Tennessee. If you are a business or individual interested in supporting our mission, hop over to the website raisingkellen.org, where you can see what sponsorship looks like. It is the start of a brand new year. In review, last year's big drive was to discuss digital accessibility. A grant from the Tennessee Disability Coalition made it possible to upgrade our website as well as adopt the accessibility feature of including an edited transcript to each podcast episode. This year, we look to investigate the infrastructure that is in place to help support adults with disabilities, such as housing, transportation, education, employment, as well as medical care. These conversations may be relevant to the U.S., however, they may also benefit and provide value to persons in other geographic locations. As a reminder, the information on the podcast is presented as general education, and if you are seeking advice to your specific situation, then it's best to always contact or consult a trained professional. So the first episode of this year is actually a recording with Pete Hixson from Beyond Communities in Woodstock, Georgia. So without further ado, grab a cup of coffee, put your feet up, and get ready for some awesome conversation.
Great. Yeah, nice to meet you.
You as well. And I tell you what, Pete, thank you so much for joining us on the Raising Kellen podcast. I have to give a quick shout out to a friend of ours, David Hirsch, whose podcast is called Dad to Dad Podcast. And this is part of the Special Fathers Network. And this, guys, is basically a dad to dad mentoring program for dads raising kids with disabilities. Pitt, I heard your episode 218 with David. I took so much away from that conversation. And 2 points, the work that you do at Shepherd's College, which I would like to talk to you at maybe a later time, but the other work that you are currently doing at Beyond Communities. Before we head into that, though, sir, can you briefly tell us, Pete, just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. And it's really great to be here, and I appreciate David and the opportunity to be on his podcast and now get to be with you. So I'm 48, just turned 48. My birthday was the day after Christmas. So
happy belated birthday.
Thank you. My wife and I have been married 25 years. Her name's Hollie. We have 2 girls, Hope and Addie. Addie is our youngest. She's 18, just started at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, as a freshman in college. And then Hope, our daughter, who's 21 and is on the spectrum, was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at a young age. She's at Shepherd's College, as you just mentioned, and she's a second-year student. Would love to talk about that whenever you want to. I grew up in Iowa. My dad was a residential construction home builder, a carpenter. Like he just built houses and did renovations. And then we grew up on a small hobby farm, and then went to college in Virginia, traveled with some different groups, just got to kind of see a little bit of the country in different ways, and then met my wife. And that's when we got married in 1997. And we've lived in North Carolina, Arkansas, Florida, and then Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio. Now we're back to Georgia. So we've lived all over the place. I was a pastor for 20 some years by vocation. Now I feel just as much of a pastor to human beings, which I love. But my occupation's a little different. I do some business coaching, speaking, still do speaking in churches, some other things, and some work with Shepherd's College, as you mentioned. And then our passion is this thing called Beyond Communities. We're trying to build residential communities designed for growth and potential for the IDD community.
Pete, how did this idea originate? Obviously, you saw a need for a community such as Beyond Communities, but what kind of sparked you to take action and actually do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was very personal to us. I didn't plan on this. Again, I was a pastor for 20 some years. We were just in kind of a transition period. We had moved from Ohio back to Georgia. I was trying to figure some things out, started doing some, marketing with a friend and some coaching just to kind of put food on the table and just have a job. And in the midst of that, our daughter, Hope, was turning 18, getting ready to graduate college. And we were walking towards what everybody knows in this community is what I call the cliff. Yeah. And it's coming, but you're just surviving. And then all of a sudden you can see it and you go, oh, what are we going to do? And we know there's that transition academy school period. Most states, it's up to 22, but you're very close to this. And you just, all of a sudden, it just kind of hits you like a wall and you go, what are we going to do? And so it was out of a personal story, out of a need. And then out of, I guess, the way I'm wired is just, what is not existing that needs to exist? Like, what is the problem that needs to be solved? And we've really discovered without realizing it that, and by the way, what I've learned over the past 3 years is there are far more residential options than I knew of. I just didn't know of many. But the bigger need is there just are still not enough. And what I started to discover was we're still living a little bit in this one lump sum kind of world for special needs, whatever term you want to use. But it's hard to serve all the needs of the spectrum when you put everybody in the same place, because the needs are so different. And so what we need to do, or at least what I started down the path, was how do we create more niche environments designed for what I'm calling an ability category, because there's so many categories that we can really reach towards growth and potential. And I'm thankful for all the programs that are out there, but I think we need to start thinking more about, more, not to separate people, but more to serve an ability or what is called a disability to the highest potential, if that makes sense. And so that's where we just started discovering, all right, what are we going to do? And how we landed on this was the biggest problem. There's more day programs coming. There's even more post-secondary opportunities coming. There's jobs, and the workforce is starting to accept our community a little bit more. Their eyes are being opened. We're realizing they can do more than we thought they could. And we want to see them reach. But there's still not enough places because most are living with aging parents and there's no long-term plan. And what are we going to do? And it's a crisis. And so we've got to figure this out.
This is something a friend of mine, Wendy Smith, and I talk often of as well, Pete, especially, as you said, with aging parents. And perhaps if you don't have immediate family that either lives nearby or is perhaps willing to take on some degree of responsibility, what are the options for our kids or young adults with intellectual disability outside of independent living, where a young adult might need intermittent support? There isn't really that bridge gap.
Correct.
So what would this better community that you guys are proposing perhaps look like?
Yeah. So the gap we're trying to fill is not necessarily the lifespan. And this gets tough because parents are thinking, well, what after this? But the one that we discovered that is far less being at least attempted. And I'm learning why, because it's not easy. Nothing is easy in this,
Right.
is this young adult space. And by young adult, I'm not giving an age to it as much as, it could be from 25 to 40, 25 to 50. I don't know, but it's more about during this time of your life that is a span. And in this community, my daughter, like, she's 21, but by the time I'm around individuals who are 40, maybe 45, and their 45 is like our 25. It's like there's just so much life and youthfulness. So it's not about young adult compared to our young adult, our meaning, neurotypical or whatever. It's more about how do we create a time of life for them that I'll paint the picture this way. Unfortunately and unintentionally, I think society sees them as children and then immediately goes straight to like a senior adult. And I know no one says that, no one means that, but there is not this span of life that we get as a young professional to pursue a career, to get to kind of live a little bit independent. That's the space we're trying to fill. I realize that's not for everyone, and what we're building and what we're creating is not for every ability category. I wish we could serve everyone. My wife challenged me in the beginning when I was like, we got to do this for everybody, and the truth is, we just feel responsible to do something for the category that what I think God put in our life, which is our daughter and many like her, and as many to the left and to the right, meaning like, more advanced, a little less advanced, that we can. But if we can create a niche, that's at least taking a slice of the pie. And we're trying to inspire and encourage others to do the same. I've had so many conversations with parents that are saying, well, our child doesn't fit into that one way or the other. What do we do? And I'm just telling them, we just have to create more options and more opportunities. Because the truth for you and I, it isn't even about what our financial situation looks like. We still have options. We could live in this house or that house or this kind of home, or we could move to a town and get a job here. And you know what I'm saying? I know there's a lot of nuances around it, but for them, it's like there's literally very few options. We just need more, and more based on an ability category. So that young adult span could be from 25 to 50. Whenever they ability out, our desire is to help transition to the next phase of life, and we'll try to start that as early as possible. But what we found is there's more residential programs that are designed a little bit more for retirement, kind of an assisted living type model, than what we're trying to do, which is a little more urban, walkabout, live in a community, that kind of a thing. I hope that answers your question.
It does, Pete. So I'm trying to envision something in my mind. When you say mixed residential, is that, are you talking about perhaps a workplace being close to a residential unit? How do you all envision, or what is the dream behind that?
Yeah, and great question. And I'll get more specific. So our model and desire is to go into, and we have our first location. And so I'm a very visual person. If I could paint the picture, I would, but I'll try to do it with words. Most areas around the country are taking either an old area and they're refurbishing it, or they're looking at new and they're building this into it. The term is mixed use, which basically just means there's some residential there, there's some shops there, there's some restaurants there. Sometimes there's a green space for activity. It's basically a mixed use, safe walkabout, if you will, type downtown. Sometimes like where we live, we live in Woodstock, Georgia. This place was very different than it is now. It is really evolved, and everybody wants to live down there because there's everything, and you can like walk there, live there, do the whole thing. Well, I tell people we want to live in those kinds of spaces because they're very popular. and they have everything right there. They need to live in these spaces. And so our first location, we're building 6 townhomes right in the dead center of an already existing developed mixed use community where there's a neighborhood behind it. There's office space, there's restaurants, there's shops, there's a big green space with a stage. They do concerts, cornhole tournaments, they do activity. There's a brewery up the street. There's just all about community involvement. What we are proposing and what we're building into this is we aren't putting the responsibility on that development, but the subsidiary support that comes along with living in the middle of that is exactly an environment that is perfect for our community that we'll call this higher functioning, physically higher. And this isn't, our program isn't, I don't even want to call it a program, but our model, I guess, isn't for someone coming out of high school. You would have needed to go to some kind of, couple years of a independent training, like our daughter's going to Shepherd's College. There's a lot of colleges that have programs that are continuing to train and teach. The goal is they will be working during the day as much as they can. And then we will have some permanent residential director that will live in one of the townhomes. And then our proposition is we'll build 6 townhomes. 1 will be more for staff. 5 of them will have residents, 4 in each. And we'll probably have 1 for the males and 1 for the females, kind of like a guide / mentor, but very much giving them structure, just making sure, are they taking their meds? Are they getting to work? Are they, living? And then we are looking at some with technology today, and we all wear these Apple Watches that can detect all the safety things. We are going to piggyback on that, and there are some programs out there that have these appropriate tracking devices, if you will. I say that respectively, that we're not trying to, but we want to know, we have to monitor as much as possible. And then we are partnering with businesses, churches, and the community around it to make sure, okay, is there extra support needed for transportation? Could 40% of our residents work in one of those shops or restaurants that they could literally walk to? So that takes some transportation issues out of the equation. But these mixed-use developments need to be surrounded in a community where there are shops and other places of employment, because the whole goal is that they're living like a young adult as much as possible with independence, that they're going to work. We'll have some programming, but our idea is we're not building a campus model where you're fenced in and you're at kind of like a college, right? That's for a phase of life. This is for after that. What do you do after that? For 10, 15 years, and you build a career, you build relationships. The beautiful part is the merchants, the other residents, this community, they'll get to know them. They'll love them. There'll be another set of eyes and hearts and hands and ears. And that's why it's a lot of subsidiary support. We just feel like it's the perfect type of environment. And then our big dream is we will have Beyond communities spread across the U.S. So wherever you live, someone could either say, or move and say, where could we go where we can find a Beyond Communities, because we just found that model fit for us.
Well, that sounds amazing. And how would a young adult apply to a program like this? What would be some of the pathways to access a resource such as Beyond Communities?
Yeah. So for us right now, we are connecting with folks. The next step is we will start taking applications. We're not ready for that. We're trying to raise the capital, because the other big part of this is the financial picture, right? Yes. We all know this. Unfortunately for us, our model puts us in the highest expense type real estate you could get in. The townhomes we're building, you could build for 50% of the cost, out in the country. Right. But that breaks our model of what we're trying to do. That we're not saying we're the only thing, but what we're trying to do. So we're trying to raise, my goal is we're trying to raise 50% of the capital. And it doesn't have to be a townhome we're building. That just happens to be our first location. The next location, we might buy, rent, or lease for a long time, 20 units for individuals to live in, but it's the same model. And we're trying to subsidize the cost as much as possible, but not free or cheap. It's just, hey, we're trying to make this more affordable. And we're also looking for residents who want to work, want to contribute, want to make sure, and our model, and at least we think in most places, will still allow for whatever government assistance they get to be applied, because we're not an institution. We're literally a townhome. It's rent. And so, I know legislature and all this stuff is kind of changing, and it needs to, and we're all working towards allowing, funds to be a little more fluid so that people can live in the places that are best suited for them. But right now on our website, which is just beyondcommunities.org, you can just connect with us. And then we are just, we have a building list of people who are interested, some more interested, some just checking it out, many saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we've been looking for. And some are, getting into, they're in high school, so they're a little young for us, but it's never too early to think about it. Others, their child is 35, they've been living with them, they have a job. I try to describe to people the assessment for us in a snapshot is it's individuals that maybe couldn't live 100% on their own, but they could possibly live 70 to 80% on their own, maybe 65. I don't really know what the number is, but how do we fill that gap? And then we're building what I'm calling an appropriate support model that just fills in that gap with, as I've described to you. But we will have an assessment process because we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. This isn't necessarily for everyone with special needs. Like I said, we're not trying to serve the whole pie here. We're trying to take a slice of it and do the best that we can. We're learning some things from folks who have been doing something like this for a long time. One of them is Shepherd's College, where Hope goes. Now it's a 3-year program, but they have a really great assessment process. They also have an online tool that we're planning for all of our residents to subscribe to so that their mentor or guide will make sure they're going to take classes online. We're going to make sure they're continuing to grow. You and I can listen to a podcast like this and grow ourselves. We'll read a book, and they want to continue growing this community, but they just need a little extra support to do it. And we're going to make sure that all of those things are happening. So the assessment to get in will be, how do we feel like, is this a good fit for everyone? Is this a win? Is this going to be the kind of place? And parents and caregivers are typically the best ones to know what that is, So yeah, that's kind of the idea. We aren't, quote, taking applications, but we are connecting with a lot of folks, and you can do that online with us.
Pete, thank you so much for the work that you are doing in this space. Undoubtedly, it's one that needs attention and folks need to start thinking of. Is there anything, sir, that you would like to, words that you would like to leave us with? Any encouragement?
Yeah, I think as a parent, I understand how difficult it can be. And being a parent, period, is tough, right? Like, you just, to a degree, I tell people, you're just surviving and trying to make it day to day. Being a parent in this realm is like putting one log in front of the other to cross an ocean that you don't know if there's another side to. And so sometimes you just feel like it's just, we're going to drown. What I want to say is you're not alone. There are people who are coming to the table to solve some long-term problems that I think, again, we've unintentionally just set aside because of our unintentional, maybe just didn't see how much there could be. And so early intervention is huge, whether it's therapies, like do something, get in a community, be a part of people who are moving the needle forward. not inappropriately, not like, hey, challenging this community to do something that they aren't able to do. But I think there's a real need to believe, and a real need to believe that more is possible, and appropriately just tiptoe into that. And the earlier, the better. One of the things we have found that we struggle is parents who have been in this game for a long time and did not have options. And now their children are older and the parents are much older. And it's hard to imagine that, they could live independently. And we're just trying to say that there's more possible, I guess. And so I want to encourage folks to realize they're not alone. Take a step in something. And if you see a gap that's not being filled, raise your hand and say, we'll fill that gap, as a parent. Most things in special needs community, IDD, most environments, whether it's post-secondary, residential, day programs, work programs, they were all started by parents, because we know that what's needed, right? So what you're doing, like, this is a need. We just need to encourage people. We got to get the word out. We got to make sure you just start filling that need because you are a product of the need, right? Right. So I never thought I would have any sort of a professional, if you will, approach to this. I've just always been a parent, and I still feel I'm just a parent, but I want to make a difference. My wife and I want to help, and it all comes because of our daughter, but there are so many others struggling like us. And so, fill that gap as much as you can.
Pete, for those listeners that would like to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, just email me. It's just Pete, Pete, at beyondcommunities.org. Pete at beyondcommunities.org.
Pete, once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful. Great to meet you. I'm so thankful to be here.
Guys, thank you so much for listening along on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation between myself and Pete. Just as a reminder, we have some really interesting episodes coming along. Soon I will be chatting with Jeff Strand of the Tennessee Disability Coalition, who is going to be informing us of the policies that will be on the table for this upcoming Tennessee General Assembly. So stay tuned for that. Also, Disability Day on the Hill will be coming along soon on March the 8th. To find out more about Tennessee Disability Day on the Hill, hop over to tndisability.org to find out more about the events being scheduled. As always, if you need to contact us, you can reach us at the following email, and that is raisingkillen@gmail.com. Do take a look at the new revamped website over at raisingkillen.org, and we would appreciate any comments or feedback. We sincerely appreciate a rate and review of this podcast. It does allow us to be found on your podcast platform. And as always, remember, get to the top of your mountain. This is Marsh Naidu signing off.